Panzironi explain. So, Mr. Panzironi, in the past episodes, we talked about carbohydrates, we talked about protein. So now it's time to talk about another macronutrient. We're talking about fats. Here are the fats. What does it tell us?
Well, fats are amazing. Unfortunately, official medicine has been criminalizing them for about 40 years, when actually knowing them well really makes us understand the mistakes that this dogmatic medicine makes. So I felt it was absolutely essential to delve into this very issue.
Very good. And so to delve into it, I would say right away, let's watch this video so that we all know what these infamous fats are.
Fats or lipids, from the Greek lipos, are made up of carbon and hydrogen atoms joined together. Fats, based on their bonds in the carbon chain, can be classified into saturated fatty acids, polyunsaturated fatty acids, and monounsaturated fatty acids. In fact, if the series of carbon atoms, each of which is paired with 2 hydrogen atoms, is unbroken, we are in the presence of a saturated fatty acid. If, on the other hand, the series of carbon atoms is interrupted by a carbon atom with double bonds, paired with only 1 hydrogen atom, the fatty acid is called monounsaturated. If, on the other hand, the series of carbon atoms is interrupted by multiple carbon atoms with double bonds occurring, coupled with only 1 hydrogen atom, the fatty acid is called polyunsaturated. In addition, fatty acids are also defined by the length of the chain of carbon atoms. In fact, there are short-chain saturated fatty acids, such as butyric acid with only 4 carbon atoms, up to saturated fatty acids with the longest chain, with 32 atoms, such as laceroic acid. The greater the number of atoms in the chain, the higher the melting temperature. While fatty acids with double carbon bonds, such as monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, take on a folded form, conferring the fluidity of fats at room temperature. In addition, the more double bonds present, the greater the oxidation of the fatty acid.
So, Panzironi, a little chemistry doesn't hurt. However, I have seen a few puzzled faces, so it is also a bit difficult to be understood.
Yes, it's true. It's certainly an important but complicated topic. But it also makes us understand why these saturated fats that are so criminalized by official medicine are actually the best fats we have. And this video made us understand many things. For example, the fact that there are these double bonds on the carbon atoms, that in saturated fatty acids there being practically an oxidation of fatty acids, it is very difficult for that to happen. For example, in olive oil, we have a peroxidation capacity, then rancidity of this fat of 5 times what are the saturated fatty acids. Even in omega-6, which have 1 double bond, we have 50 times the risk that they can rancidify. And even in omega-3, which have 3 carbon double bonds, we even get to 100 times the degree of oxidation of normal saturated fat. This really makes us understand why nature has chosen saturated fat for our bodies instead of the other fatty lipids.
But Panzironi, yet official medicine for many years has demonized the consumption of saturated fatty acids at the expense, indeed in favor of monounsaturated ones, for example.
Well, sure, because unfortunately sometimes, let's say medicine looks at maybe scientific studies that then technically, however, have no real construct. Actually, we always have to reason about what is the structure of fatty acids. Saturated fatty acids are the best because precisely they do not risk peroxidation. We know that when a fatty acid is peroxidized, it is able to produce free radicals and thus damage the tissues that are present, but it is not by chance that nature always does things right. In fact, when we produce these fatty acids in endogenous form, we do so by converting sugar into palmitic acid, which is precisely a saturated fatty acid with 18 carbon atoms. And then another peculiarity of these fatty acids is that they have a very long carbon chain, and this allows for each carbon atom to produce the energy ATPs. So the longer the fatty acid, the more energy our mitochondrion will be able to get precisely from that fatty acid.
Look, Panzironi, when we talk about fat, especially an excess of fat in our blood, we talk about triglycerides. So I would say let's watch a video to understand what these triglycerides are. Let's see it together.
Fatty acids are naturally occurring in the form of triglycerides, which is a lipid composed of a glycerol molecule to which 3 fatty acids are bound. Triglycerides can be composed of the same type of fatty acid and thus are called simple, or by 3 different fatty acids, and so are called mixed triglycerides. Triglycerides can be taken in from the diet, from animal or vegetable fats, or be produced endogenously and then travel in the blood within lipoproteins, and then be used for energy or accumulated within adipocyte cells. Food-derived triglycerides are first cleaved into individual fatty acids and then reesterified to triglycerides by the same cells in the intestinal epithelium, finally transported via lipoproteins called chylomicrons. Endogenous production of triglycerides occurs by the liver and adipocytes, which transform acetyl-CoA, a process that occurs within the cell cytosol, by the hormone insulin. From the liver, they are then transported into the bloodstream via lipoproteins called VLDL.
So Panzironi, I understand that we find fats basically bound in triglycerides and not in the form of free fatty acids.
Yes, we find them in the food we eat once we ingest them. We have enzymes that go to break down this glycerol molecule from the 3 fatty acids, at which point the enterocytes, the cells in the intestine, absorb these fatty acids and rebuild the triglyceride and actually form a new triglyceride precisely with glycerol and 3 fatty acids, after which they are placed inside these lipoproteins, which are precisely the chylomicrons that can then flow back into the blood and deliver precisely the fatty acids to the cells that require them.
In addition, then we understood that some of the triglyceride fats also come from our own endogenous production by hepatocytes and adipocyte cells.
Of course, this is an important aspect because we don't just get fatty acids from food, but the liver is able to transform sugars into fatty acids. Fat this via insulin, and so new triglycerides are created. VLDL are created, which are these lipoproteins that are filled precisely with fatty acids, and then triglycerides, and then it's these that have to deliver precisely the fatty acids to the various cells that will require them.
Look, however, Panzironi, you have to make us understand one more thing, because if these VLDLs are in charge of transporting fatty acids into the cells of our body, why do they then accumulate in the blood?
Well, this is the classic problem of the Mediterranean diet because, unfortunately, when we eat foods like bread, pasta, pizza, potatoes, rice, carbohydrate-rich legumes, well, insulin does one thing. On the one hand, it pushes the evolution of these VLDLs, which then increase in number. On the other hand, once these VLDLs are, let's say, put into the bloodstream, they prevent muscle cells, but also other cells in our body by inhibiting the enzyme lipase from disassembling these triglycerides, therefore, in effect, forcing the cells to go to sugar, prevents them from utilizing fats. And so VLDL accumulates, and thus we have high amounts of triglycerides in the blood.
So thank you to our Adriano Panzironi for this valuable information.